Welcome back to the third installment of the Work With What You Got series. We are going to be finishing up our outfit today. My name is Jesse Beardslee. I'm the owner and creator at Themis and Thread, and again, I'm sewing with you tonight at the shared studio space in Hector Handmade on Seneca Lake. I've had a lot of fun working with you guys over the past 3 weeks. I hope that you're really proud of yourself and ready to celebrate your own creative literacy with me and the entire Southeast Steuben County Public Library. If you have watched the first two classes, we started with the bodice or a top, and then we moved to a sash belt or a waist tie, and tonight we're going to finish up with the skirt. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind with the skirt. If you are adding the skirt to the bodice, you're going to want to make sure that it's long enough. You're going to want to make sure that it's wide enough, and you're going to want to make sure that you can get in and out of it. That might mean trying it on a bunch of times. If you're just making a separate skirt itself, do keep in mind that you're going to need plenty of seam allowance, which can be added if you don't have enough for the skirt portion, to have either a waist tie, like a drawstring, or to attach your elastic band. Those are the two ways that I recommend finishing a skirt if you are a beginner sewer. If you're disassembling a dress or a skirt that has a lining, keep in mind that the lining might be a little bit smaller than the outer shell of the dress or skirt, and do go ahead before you cut into it and pin along the edges where they are stitched together. And when you cut it off, try to cut it off right above that seam so that you actually have that seam and it's all in one piece still. If you do cut it into two separate pieces, that's fine. If you don't want to keep the lining, that's also fine. If you want to attach the lining separately or use only the lining of a dress, that's also fine. Work with what you got and do it however you want to do it. Now, if you've stuck with me from the very beginning and have seen all the videos, including my intro video, you might remember some of the pieces that I had together. And they looked pretty weird until we started really cutting into it and putting it all together as an outfit. One of the pieces that I chose to upcycle was a dress because it had really skinny straps that had broken. You can see that strap gave up the ghost and I tied it in a knot to get through the night, but it also had a bunch of tears in between the tiers of the skirt itself. You can make a tiered skirt if you like. One of the things to keep in mind is that you're going to want to be sure that every piece that you add on is at least as wide all the way around as the piece that you're attaching it to. So the bottom hem of my top right now is a little over 46 inches. So I can't add anything that is less than 46 inches to the length of this because it'll create a weird shape. You can add something longer, and you can do that by either adding some pleats or adding some gathers. Now, we've done gathers to create these flowers, and we did those by hand. You could do the gather for your skirt by hand if you like, but that'll probably take quite a while. Hopefully your sewing machine has a basting stitch so that you can just stitch at the widest stitch length along the very top edge of the skirt. That way you can just pull that thread and it'll start to cinch up into a gather. Think about where you want the gathers. You can have it all the way around, or you can have just like a spray of gathers in the center front. That's a nice place to add a little bit of fullness into a dress to help you get in and out, especially with the waist tie there. Since I know how wide this is and how wide my skirt is, that's where I'm going to start. And the first thing that I'm going to show you how to do is how to make a really beautiful French seam, which is a great way to connect your bodice to your skirt or tiers of your skirt to itself. This is a really beautiful way to have a nice finished seam inside the garment. So if you have a couple of pieces that you want to attach for your skirt, this is a really nice way to make it look professional and finished. And it also, if you are attaching your bodice to your skirt, this is a good way to do that, whether your top or bottom are knit or woven. So you want to have both sides of the fabric facing out the good way. And what we're going to do is pin the seam together so that you see the seam on the outside. It looks kind of funny, but you pin all the way around, and then we're going to press that flat and turn it inside out after we stitch it. A French seam is also a great option if you are working with some material that is much wider than what you're attaching it to, like the bodice. You just cut it on the side to make it the right width, and then follow along with these easy instructions for that French seam. Now that we have this pinned around the outside so that it looks like we're putting the seam on the wrong way, we're going to stitch it down. You have that guide set up on your sewing machine with some masking tape, washi tape, or painter's tape. You can just drop the presser feet, line it up with your guide, and start stitching. Always back tack after you first start and when you finish. Now we have the seam on the outside of the skirt, and we're just gonna use a little bit of mist or your seam iron, and we're going to press it open. I like to press it up first, and then press it down. Be sure that you're only ironing onto one side of the fabric and not through the whole skirt or bodice. And I've done that just by like wrapping it around, sliding it through my ironing board. Press it up first. Get a nice crisp line, and then press it down. Do that all the way around. Now that the raw seam is pressed on the outside, you can look on the inside and see how clean and crisp that really is. So turn it inside out and take a look at that. So we have a nice clean seam on the inside. Flip the whole thing inside out and take this clean seam and fold it in half and pin it all the way around to prepare it for the sewing machine. Now, since we just stitched this with the guide on our sewing machine, we're going to make the next seam on the inside, which will be the finishing seam, a little bit bigger. Now that we have this new seam pressed out and pinned all the way around, and it's very important to have that seam right at the edge, we're going to take a look at our guide here with the tape. Like I said before, we want this next seam to be bigger than this one. So I'm going to measure an additional eighth of an inch in, and just mark it on top of that tape strip that is already there. So instead of following this tape guide, I'm going to follow the new mark that I'm putting on it right now. That's going to make this a wider seam, and it's going to make it a really clean seam inside and out for this either tier of our skirt or connection from the bodice. Again, I'm not following the inside of the guide, I'm following this new mark that I just made with my ruler on the tape. So when I take that off of the sewing machine, you can see this nice new seam that we have created, and with it inside out, we're going to fold down towards the bottom and then press it from the inside. Do this all the way along the seam. Pressing, you always want to press down, and when you hit a side seam, you always want to press to the back. Now that your inside French seam is pressed down, take a look at how beautiful that is. Turn your bodice, dress, or skirt right side out. And see how lovely and sharp that looks on the outside. You might have a couple of loose threads. Just go ahead and trim it. That's why we made that second line of stitching a little bit larger so that your fabric doesn't poke through. Now you might have a little tiny bit of it. Can you see right there that I accidentally went a little bit shorter, or maybe that part of the seam was a little bit longer. So I'm just going to trim that down very carefully and just pick up any loose threads that you have. If you want to press it down again from the right side, you can, but just check out that nice new seam, that tier of your skirt, or that connection with your bodice. Now that you know a little bit more about how to disassemble, reassemble, and fit your skirt, I'm going to show you some finishing techniques. We'll start with how to hem the skirt, which is going to be exactly like how we hemmed the bodice for those of you that finished your top instead of turning it into a dress. And I'm also going to show you how to make either a stretchy elastic waistband or a drawstring waistband. To hem your skirt, if you've already cut it to the length that you like and there was an appropriate hem left at the bottom of the piece that you are upcycling, you can just leave it. But if not, if it's too long, you can hem it just as easily as we hemmed that bodice. So from the back side of the skirt, so the inside, we'll measure maybe just a 1/4 inch, and you can pin along the edge to mark a 1/4 inch, or you can even just take your pen and mark all the way along the hem a 1/4 inch, and then press it down with your hot iron. And after you've done that all the way around, we'll come back and fold it over twice as much. So we go from a 1/4 inch to one more 1/2 inch, which is going to make it 3/4 of an inch. Go ahead and mark that all the way around, press it down, pin it down, take it to your sewing machine, and give it a stitch right along this beautifully folded edge. For the waistband of your skirt, you want to know how much space you're going to need to get the widest part of your body in and out of the skirt. So measure the widest part of your hips, or just pull the skirt over and make sure that you can get all the way around. Whether you've decided to make your skirt waist with elastic or a drawstring, it's still going to need to be big enough to make it all the way around the widest part of your hips. A drawstring can be anything. It could be ribbon, it could be twill tape, whatever it is, just make sure that it's long enough, just like the sash belt was, to not only go around you at the widest point, but to also tie in a bow. To encase a drawstring into the waistband of your skirt, just like we did the hem, you want to fold down about a 1/4 inch and stitch all the way along that folded edge. Once you have that folded edge stitched down, basically what you'll do is sandwich the drawstring Once you have that folded edge stitched down, take another 1/4 inch and go ahead and pin your extra long drawstring all the way around the inside of your waistband. Once it's pinned and pressed and prepared, go ahead and take the folded edge and wrap it all the way around that drawstring. Just play peekaboo and pull out the pin replace it down below, and then pin another one in to make sure that that drawstring stays right there. Go ahead and do that all the way around the waistband. Peekaboo, pull it up, make sure it stays in place, pull the edge down, pin that stitched fold, and then pin that drawstring so that it doesn't budge. This way you make sure that the drawstring stays far away from where your line of stitching is going to go. Before you pin at center front or center back, wherever you'd like the drawstring to come out where you're going to tie your skirt, take your edge to your sewing machine and create 2 buttonholes, perpendicular, that will be wide enough for each edge of your drawstring to slip through. This is how your drawstring will go to the outside of your skirt. This is how you will tie your skirt and secure it around your waist. If you'd like to finish your skirt waistband with elastic, first choose what width of elastic you'd like. This is a bit smaller than what I would typically make a skirt with, but this is just what I had on hand, and I'm just working with what I got. For the elastic band, again, you'll want it to be wide enough to go all the way around your waist and also all the way down below the widest part of your hips. I like to wrap the elastic band around my waist and pinch it just a little bit tighter than what is comfortable. From there, you can just trim an extra ½ inch for your seam allowance. Fold it in half with your raw edges together. And take that elastic to the sewing machine and stitch it down a few times. When you have a circle of elastic that's the right size for your waistband, we're going to do a similar thing that we did with the drawstring example, where it will be sandwiched in fabric, but you will never actually stitch the elastic itself. Cinching and gathering and fitting that elastic in a little bit manually with your fingers and pins. But again, we start with folding the edge down, giving yourself a nice fold, determining how much space you need to really give yourself the freedom for this elastic waistband to set within itself. Before actually folding this over and stitching it around the elastic, go ahead and stitch it down on the edge. Then fold over, being very sure to keep that elastic far away from where the needle will go. Pin that elastic at the top. And pin your folded edge over. Like I said, you may have to kind of cinch it and work it around a little bit, but as long as you've measured everything to be the same, this will come out as a really nice, smooth and comfortable waistband. Thank you so much for joining me for this Work With What You Got sewing tutorial series brought to you by the Southeast STEUBEN County Library. It's been a lot of fun working with you, and I hope that you've learned some upcycling techniques that you're going to practice. Taking old clothing and materials that would have otherwise been thrown away and turning them into something new is a lot of fun, and it's really great for your creativity and our environment. Jesse Beardslee from Themis and Thread, signing off.